And we are live. This is GMA Talk, where we be informed about refugees issues and migrants and asylum seekers from around the world. And not just informing, but we also call to action. So welcome on today, on this week's episode, where we have a very special guest, a great friend of mine, Anna. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. It's great to be
No
here.
problem. And I'm very excited today just to talk about the beautiful Mexico and the amazing people over there and the generosity and just the hospitality when it comes to refugees and migrants and asylum seekers, whether it's from Southern America or like Central America. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for this chat and just to paint some light in terms of what is happening in the region.
Yeah, it should be great. It's an interesting topic.
So and then yeah, we just dive into it, in terms of your name and which organization you work for, and then just your role in the organization.
Perfect. So my name is Ana Alanis. Right now I'm working with IOM, which is the UN Migration Agency. I'm a protection assistant here in Mexico. And basically our role as protection assistants is reaching out to the migrant population that is at the borders, but also inside the country, and seeing kind of what they need, what their vulnerabilities are, what situations they're in, and how we as a UN agency can help them. But today, really, I am speaking kind of out of my own opinion and experience in a personal capacity, not, as an organization.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much for introducing yourself and also highlighting in terms of which capacity you are speaking about and representing about today. But still, just looking forward in terms of the conversation we're gonna have today for sure together. And then in terms of that conversation, because when people think about Mexico, they don't think about Mexico hosting refugees and or hosting migrants or asylum seekers. So the first question would be in terms of like paint us a picture in terms of the situation in Mexico and where do these people come from.
Okay, yeah. So refugees and asylum seekers and migrants in Mexico, it's a very thin line compared to other parts of the world. So sometimes people can be coming from a forced migration context. Sometimes it's not direct persecution. But really the big chunk of the migrants and refugees that Mexico hosts are Central Americans. What is called the Northern Triangle of Central America. It can be Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. These are countries with a very strong context of organized crime and gangs, which often can drive people out. There's also a context of economic hardship, people that might not be able to make a living or feed their families. Political instability can sometimes play a role as well. So you have all these kind of very strong structural factors that are just making it very difficult for people to live their lives in these countries. And they're making their way up north. Quite a few of them don't have Mexico as their intended destination. Quite a few of them really do want to get to the United States to pursue this American dream. But because of some political developments that I'm sure we can talk about today, quite a few of them are getting stuck in Mexico. So Mexico is not just becoming this transit country, but also a really big host country as well for the time being.
Yeah, for sure. And we will, in terms of getting more, in terms of the ultimate hope or the ultimate goal, in terms of where they end up, But that we'll get into a little bit later. But in terms of when you talk about this, like people like coming from Central America, making like their way up into Mexico, and also like wanting to go into the United States. But for Mexico specifically, when they transition or when they are being hosted in Mexico, like which are some of the challenges that Mexico faces as a result of having all of these people, like whether it's passing through or staying in the country?
So Mexico is a very big country geographically. Um, and because Mexico is kind of on the way north of these Central American countries, you do have quite a bit of challenges near the southern border, then another different set of challenges kind of in the middle of the country, and the northern border is a challenge in and of itself. As a country, Mexico had elections a year and a bit ago. Um, and the country has been going through economic reform, political reform. Um, with the pandemic situation, there's obviously been a lot of labor challenges as well coming to the country. A lot of people have kind of found themselves in unemployment. Um, and all of this is just, a special political context in Mexico after elections with the migrant caravans that we saw, within the past 2 years, these
Hmm.
massive flows of people. Um, and it's challenges on all fronts. It's challenges economically. How do we integrate these people into our economy and make sure they're contributing and making a living for themselves, but also not displacing Mexican workers?
Hmm.
How do we assure that they're taken care of physically, that they have access to healthcare services? But at the end of the day, a lot of Mexican citizens don't have access to that themselves. How do we deal with racism and xenophobia of Mexican citizens being afraid of all these people coming in, and how do
Hmm.
we make sure that these people are being welcomed and listened to and have their rights respected? So there's all these challenges coming from all these different ways,
Hmm.
and then very specifically kind of localized challenges as well at the different points along the border or along the migrant route.
Hmm. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, when you talk about in terms of politically, socially, or even like some of the xenophobia, like in terms of for people on the ground not to have against these other migrants. But and then into that same line, then which kind of support are these migrant or asylum seekers or refugees like receiving, whether it's from Mexican government, from UNHCR, from IOM, or from other partners organization? Like, how are these people being supported in the country?
Okay, so I particularly do a lot of work on the northern border, which is where a lot of these migrants who are going to ask for asylum in the US have to wait because of a new
Mm,
policy from about a year and a bit ago.
yes.
These are asylum seekers who have every intention of requesting asylum in the US, but the US has asked them to wait in Mexico until their entire asylum process is kind of completed. So you have these people kind of stuck on the border, especially with COVID. A lot of them can't go back to their countries now. Um, and they can't go into the United States. And these are cities of high crime as well. Independent of migration, there's a lot of drug activity in a lot of these cities. So it's not an ideal place to be. And what the UN kind of tries to do in these situations is kind of try to see what these people, these migrant people, are needing. So with COVID, we had the situation that a lot of migrant people couldn't go into shelters because shelters were afraid that migrants might be bringing in virus.
Hmm.
So what the UN did was they paired up with hotels in these cities,
Mm.
and we agreed to have a filter hotel where migrants could spend 2 weeks of quarantine, make sure they didn't have the virus, and then this would free up
Wow.
options for them to kind of integrate.
Hmm.
Something else that's being done is now a lot of people do want to return to their home country, and return should always be voluntary.
Hmm.
But with closed borders, it can be quite difficult. So IOM actually has a voluntary return program where even if borders are closed, IOM can get some planes, make sure
Okay.
that migrants do have this voluntary intention to go back. There's a screening process to make sure they're not in danger when they go back to their country, but it does allow them kind of the process of kind of getting back to Honduras or El Salvador. Um,
Hmm.
and apart from that, you have like the traditional support. There's a big program right now at IOM that deals with helping people cover rent for a few months and kind of have a debit card that they can use to buy very, very basic products, toilet paper, baby food, all these sorts of things. So just kind of helping them go through the basic processes that they're going to need to while they're waiting for their asylum case, is kind of the more direct sort of assistance that is
Hmm.
being given to these people at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for painting a very clear picture, for us today in terms of like the support and the challenges, that are being offered. to the migrants in the region and in the country. So, but then you also mentioned in terms of filing asylum application in the U.S. and then people having to wait in Mexico as a result of the change policy from the current administration in the United States. So, what are some of the challenges at the border, like between the U.S. and Mexico, and particularly, in terms of Matamoros camp? Like, I hear that in that area, it has become very crowded, or it's like it's a makeshift like camp or makeshift shelter. Like, what's happening in the border? Like, what are the border activities, and how is the situation there?
Okay, so the Mexican border with the US is geographically quite long. And you have these very traditional border crossing points like Tijuana, Mexicali, Ciudad Juárez, Matamoros is one of them. Um, and because of how this policy called the Migrant Protection Protocols work, is that a migrant person crosses into the United States, and then they get given a court date when they need
Hmm.
to go back to the United States.
Oh, wow.
Um, Different cities and different courts have different lengths between when you get
Hmm.
your date and when you actually go. So
Wow.
sometimes it can be 3 months. Right now with COVID, a lot of them got paused, so it's actually a lot more. Um, but because they're going to have to go back to the U.S., a lot of these people are staying in these border cities to wait for their court date. But a lot of them don't have work permits, even though they're supposed to get one from the Mexican government. So it can be really hard to support yourself when you can't work and you still have to stay there to go to your court date. So you get what are called these, like the Matamoros camp. In some other cities, government has been quite supportive, and actually in Ciudad Juarez, which is a bit further west, there is a big government shelter. They cleared out a factory and they're hosting migrants there while they kind of go to their appointment. But the challenges are actually quite broad. Apart from finding a job and supporting yourself, is I'm going to have to go to court in the United States. I need to
Hmm.
get a lawyer. A Mexican lawyer doesn't work. It needs to be an American lawyer. And even though organizations on the U.S. side of the border do cross over and try to speak to migrants, access is quite limited. With the pandemic right now, mobility is quite limited, so attorneys can't be crossing over. And recently also because of COVID, the US and Mexico kind of crossed the land border as well, which makes it quite difficult
Hmm.
for attorneys to communicate with migrants. So the challenge of finding legal representation is huge. um, Apart from that, you have medical challenges as well. Hospitals are saturated with COVID and COVID related kind of causes. But if a migrant woman came to Ciudad Juarez or Tijuana pregnant, they're going to need to get care for their baby, care for their child, and because a lot of them can't work, they're kind of in this limbo where they're not sure how long they're going to be there, when their next court date is, how it's going to go. So
Hmm.
really, just being in this kind of protracted displacement situation is a huge challenge in and of itself.
Wow, that's it's a very, even for me personally, like it's a very mind-opening and very informative, just to be able to learn more, know about these activities which are happening at the border, and like in terms of the court cases and the crossing over and the challenges of even representation. So, it's very, very nice, to learn about these issues which are happening on the ground, which are happening in the country and also in the border in the US. But and then for the general Mexican population or the Mexican government, what is the general feeling when it comes like to this migrant passing through the country or staying in the country? Like, how do Mexican perceive this situation?
Um, as a personal opinion, I would say it varies quite a bit from city to city and from person to person. Um, I know a lot of my friends and family members did not know that this was the situation of migrants that are asking for asylum in the US having to wait in Mexico. The case with Central Americans or even Venezuelans and Cubans that are arriving to the country is that very often they do look quite a bit like the native Mexican population,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and they speak Spanish as well. Um, so integration might not seem like a big challenge because these are people that speak the language that
Mm-hmm.
in theory are not tremendously different racially. But at the end of the day, a lot of these cities do have strong migration contexts for decades and decades. And it can be a challenge to suddenly see all these foreigners come into a city that's already struggling with labor opportunities, and kind of, think not only is there the risk of COVID now with migrants coming in, but also finding jobs. Um, and xenophobia has been an issue in a lot of these northern border towns, not only from the Mexican people, but very often from the people who are supposed to be helping migrants themselves, service providers, medical services. Things like this can be a big challenge. But it does vary tremendously in cities like Ciudad Juarez that has a big migration kind of history. Civil society is busy and it's
Mm,
active and it's empowering. So you do get cities where, in the context of this pandemic and the caravans, a lot of people just say, how are we going to help? What we can do to really open up the city for this population. So I think it varies tremendously from city to city and from
mhm.
person to person.
Okay. Yeah, it's very nice, very good in terms of painting the picture for us. Yeah, in terms of the perception varies, depending of the town and the city where people are passing to and where people are coming from. And you already also in terms of little bit touches in terms of the challenges the local population themselves, the Mexican are going through. But is there any more you can add in terms of just the local challenges that the Mexican themselves they face? Because by my understanding that there's also maybe some local Mexicans who also want to make it to the state, right? And then you're also getting like migrants also from other region also want to make it to the state. So in terms of that shift or that one can call it a circle, because you're getting this even in some of the African countries. You are getting in a country where there's like conflict or where there's poverty or there's like economical situation, where people are living as migrants or as refugees, and then but the same country might also be receiving migrants and refugees. So like this cycle for me, it's always very complex and always very interesting and try to put it into picture where, maybe the local people themselves are having challenge and issues, but and then you are seeing the same local, they're trying to integrate, support, and help other people who are seeking shelter and support in the country. Can you paint us more picture in terms of some of the issues that Mexican population face in the country, whether it's economically, socially, or politically?
Of course. So Mexico has always been a massive country of origin where people kind of migrate north to the United States. I think something that we don't talk about enough as well is two other kinds of migration, which is internal migrants. So
Mm,
Mexican migrants who are moving from the south to the north of the same country, or returnees. Mexico has a big returnee context because a lot of Mexicans either voluntarily come back from the United States or get sent back.
mm,
And that's a whole different issue in and of itself, right? Because sometimes you have people who built a life in the United States and now are coming back.
yeah.
And how do you really reintegrate them into a country where they haven't lived in for years, where they might not even know what kind of job they can come back to? Um, and like you said, we always have this image of the refugee or the migrant kind of coming from abroad. Um, but Mexico does have a huge context with natives, and I do think it's political, economic, social. Um, I think in Central America, including Mexico, the migration culture is a big thing. People hear about their family members, their friends going north since they're kids, and this is
Mm,
something that you just grow up hearing. And I do think that economically, for the past few years, there's been a tremendous amount of challenges for the country in terms of poverty levels, opportunity, um, and at the same time, we're seeing these flows of people moving through the country from Central America, and how does a Mexican person who is in need not say, well, I'll do that too?
mhm,
Um, and I think migration from Mexico has really been historic. But there's just so much political context around it now. You've got the caravans, you've got an administration in the US that's making a lot of changes in terms of migration policy. um, and you add to that the fact that we're living in a more and more globalized world every day, and it's getting relatively easier for ideas and people to move. Um, yeah, the movement of Mexicans, it doesn't stop, whether it's within the country, across the border, or even on their way back. And I think we really should talk more in general of internal migration and also return migration.
Hmm. Yeah, it's that's very, very interesting when you speak about like internal migration, because even here in Canada also, there's also a case of internal migration where maybe some migrants or some refugees, they were located by organization or by government to specific section of the country, and then they migrate by themselves, or they might have lived in the specific location maybe for 10 or 5 years, and then there's also like migrate for themselves, maybe because of it might be like economical opportunities or socially opportunities, right? So yeah, for sure, that's internally migration. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of, yeah, that's need itself a different case study, or looking at how governments or a society can create opportunity just across the board in whichever part of the country you live in or coming from. You have access and equal to opportunities, as other people in the big capital cities or in the big metropolitan cities. But yeah, that is a conversation of another time, which is, very interesting conversation. As also somebody who's in China, who's very interested in such world of refugees and migration. I'm always intrigued by continuous learning or continuous knowledge on some of these issues and challenges which people are facing. But let's, in terms of then, when you look at the local population or the intergovernmental organization or the government agencies in the country or regular citizens in Mexico, like how can people help, or how can people be more involved? Whether it's Mexican helping Mexicans, or Mexican helping like the migrants from other parts of the region.
Okay. So I am quite kind of like a global citizen, and I've been fortunate
I
enough to
love that.
travel. And every time I travel, I meet these incredible people who, like yourself, I'm sure, speak more than one language and can connect with more than one culture. And whenever I meet these fascinating people
Thank
and they
you.
say, "How can I help?" or "What can I do?" The first thing I say is that there is a massive shortage of language services
Mm,
available to these people. So here in Mexico, we're actually getting significant flows of people from Cameroon, from Angola,
mm,
um, from countries where really the culture and the language are very new and different to us. So these people come and they need to explain their situation, but they don't speak our language. We don't speak theirs. We don't know about their customs, their habits. Um, and something that I think is really lacking is people who can help translate documents, even if you're not a certified translator,
mhm.
who can be on a phone call to help the migrant communicate with an organization or go to the doctor and explain what's wrong with them. And that's something that anyone can do. You don't need a degree. A lot of us speak English or Spanish. I mean, you and I are communicating, and I know you have two or three countries kind of in your blood and in your heart, and
Exactly.
so do
Yeah.
I.
Hmm.
So I'm a big advocate of, if you want to help, reach out to a big organization and say, hey, I speak Urdu, or I speak any language that you might
Or
speak, and say,
French
I
or
we have
Swahili.
migrants.
Hmm.
Uh-huh, anything. Even if you speak French, because I mean, you know as well as I do, some West African countries might be able
Very
to
many,
use.
yeah. Majority of West African country, yeah. French, yeah. Hmm.
We have Haitians in Mexico, and
Hmm.
you might not speak Creole, but French might be a middle ground.
Hmm.
So I do think if people want to help, language services are
Hmm.
something that is very kind of simple to do with technology today.
Hmm.
Um, and I would just also encourage kind of people to share tolerance and share kind of being kind to one another. And if you notice a migrant in the store, someone who's not from around there, and they're struggling, like, it sounds simple, but be a good person. The world needs kindness right now. um if it's safe for you to help wearing a face mask, or given the situation, reach out to local organizations. They know best because they're working with the population. So say, hey, what
Mm,
do you need? Do you need someone to help you register people at the counter? Do you need someone to pack things into boxes? But really, grassroots organizations are the best ally to the migrant people and then to big organizations as well. So just
mhm.
reach out and see what they need, maybe.
No, well, yeah, it's no, it's as you put it for sure. It's as sometimes it's as simple, but it makes a huge difference, and it goes a long, long way in terms of helping. Whether as you say, like language service, or sometimes for me, like in the community, you find people need like tutoring service. In terms of achieving their high school education. Whether like it's in English, math, or other subject, or they need like help in terms of pointing like to job opportunities or how to tailor resumes, or nowadays every job need a cover letter, right? In terms of like writing service, So yeah, for sure, I do think yeah, people really can do so much. Like to one might seem very little thing, but to a refugee, or a migrant might seem like a world, to them, especially when you're also talking about like financial services, to be able to be educated about how the system work in the country, how to access programs, how to enroll in this and that. Yeah, for sure. And that's the one of the things for me personally I try to do is not just to educate or inform people about the issues that are happening in the world, but to say, okay, first step of helping is being informed, like taking away like the misperception, like the stereotypes, the bad perception you might have about certain cultures or certain people or migration or what is refugees, right? And then once you're really informed, once you have those information at hand, then the next step is how can you best help and support, as you say, like spread kindness, like especially at this time, we all need that kindness, and not really much of emphasis or much attention is being put in terms of migration and refugees around the world, because so many countries and everybody is focused on themselves and trying to ensure they're very secure. So this is a conversation which can go on for many hours and hours. There's two people who are very passionate about these areas of the world. But and then when you try to bring back like this conversation which we have had for the last few minutes. Is there something else that I didn't ask you, which the world or the people or the leaders or intergovernmental organization that should know in terms of whether it's about the situations in Mexico or just migrants and refugees in general?
Um, no, I think the overarching idea is that we can never know the reasons behind someone leaving their country, as well as they know their reasons for leaving their country,
Mm,
and kind of having that in mind. you know I guess the overarching idea is, let's try not to make a judgment on
mm-hmm,
who deserves to move and who doesn't, and what sort of movement is justified and which one isn't. And especially in times like this, let's just try to have empathy and, like you said, read up and be well informed. And the judgment is not for us to make. It's seeing how we can help out, how we can try to be more understanding and understand kind of these other perspectives and where people are coming from. And I
mm-hmm.
think that's really key in understanding human mobility and the situations that we're seeing right now.
Oh, well, that's yeah, it's a very great on a great note. It's a very great year to finish this great and informative conversation which we have had. And I really thank you very much for joining me this morning and just further informing people about the issues on the ground and just how they can be involved and how they can learn more about the situations in Mexico and just also what is happening at the border with the United States. Yeah, really, thank you very much. Great to see you again. Great to
Thank you
talk
for
to you.
having me.
Yeah, no problem. You're very welcome. So, any last words for our viewers of our audience?
No, thank you for listening. I hope it was engaging.
Yeah, for sure. It was very engaging and very awesome. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching, for tuning in. Until next time, right here on GMA Talk. And don't forget to subscribe, please. Love, peace, and unity. Spread kindness at all the opportunities you get. See you next time.